Hello, fellow Benzo badass superheroes. It's Debbie. It's been a while since I made a video, but I'm getting ready to start my fourth taper attempt, October 1st. So I thought I would do a two-part video. This first one is going to be on what I feel are the mistakes that I made in my first three tapers. So if you're new to this and you're just getting ready to taper, don't let that scare you. It's rare that we are able to do something difficult well the first time. And with benzo tapering, it's not that uncommon to have a failure or two under your belt. You just have to take it as learning lessons, and even though that horse bucked you off, you got to get back on. And for those of you that might be tapering right now, hopefully, especially if you're struggling, there may be some information in this video that will be helpful to get you over the hump. So, I was put on clonazepam a little over 5 years ago by my doctor. There was a pretty stressful family situation. 3 months into taking clonazepam, things had settled down, and I decided to just stop taking it and got pretty sick right away. Went back to my doctor, and because she was very uneducated about benzos, basically just said to me, well, it just appears you need to keep taking it. And so I did for the next year. And I just kept trying to get off of it because I felt like I really didn't need to take it, but I kept getting really sick. And so then I finally got on the internet and discovered to my horror that I was physically dependent on this stuff. So because I had a doctor that was so benzo dumb, she really had no kind of exit strategy for me or tapering plan. So I was pretty much on my own. So I got online, I read the Ashton manual. I felt like I had educated myself. And if you watched any of my other videos, specifically the one about keys to success, that's a big thing, is educating yourself. The problem though is now, 5 years later, I realize I hadn't educated myself enough. But so what I had done is I had read about the two different ways to taper, which is dry cutting with a jeweler's scale or water titration. And I chose a water titration. And even though I had seen videos on how sick some people got, I believed that I could cut 20% a month and I would be just fine. I created this spreadsheet, and I was very rigid in my thinking. Um, so I switched over to a water solution and cut 20% right away. So that was my first mistake. And my advice would be, if you are doing pills and you're going to switch to a water titration, do that at the same dose and give yourself at least a month or more if you can to let your body adjust, because there really is a difference switching from a pill to a water titration. Why that is, I have no idea, but I have heard that from other people. Um, and then my second mistake was I made this huge cut because in my mind, I thought, well, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to get really sick. And within a couple of weeks, I was really sick. And at the time, I was living a long ways away from family and friends. And so I felt like the best thing that I could do was just stop my taper and move closer to friends and family. But what I ended up doing was not only stopping my taper, but I went back to the original dose, and then I added in more. Because I felt like in my mind, I'm going to make this big move and I need to be as stable as I can. So I made the move and got here to where I'm living now. And I just held for about, I'd say 5 or 6 months to just get really, really stable. And I had some other things going on in my life in terms of, where am I going to live? How am I going to support myself? And I had decided to start my own business because I felt like I just wasn't well enough and I didn't know how the taper would go. So I felt like working for myself would give me a little bit more freedom. And I got really lucky and I found a benzo wise doctor who was willing to let me taper as slow as I wanted to, which is exactly what I did for 2 years. I was tapering 2 to 5% a month, and I was quite functional. I mean, I felt it, and I, definitely had peaks and valleys, but on a whole, I was able to run my business and function pretty good. So, what created the ultimate problem with that taper is about a year and a half ago, the brand that I was taking, Sandoz, was discontinued. So I needed to switch to another brand. And so I decided to do Activist. And I made the switch like super fast because I didn't think that there would be a problem. Again, because I didn't do enough research and read enough to discover that some people do have a hard time and you need to switch over to another brand much more slowly. So about a week or so into the Activist, I was just super sick. And so then I decided to switch over to brand Klonopin because I thought, oh, maybe that'll be better. Because as I finally was researching this, I came to find that there can be a huge difference between potencies between generic brands. I mean, all the way from 5, 10, 15, 20%, or even more. Because even though they say that there's FDA regulations and checking, trust me, there really isn't. Anyway, so I had a really hard time adjusting to Klonopin, and I just slowly ended up increasing my doses. Not a lot, but I had been all the way down to 0.16 with my clonazepam, and in hindsight, looking back, now I wish I had just maybe divided that dose in over the course of 3 months and just tapered off of it. I think it might have been rough, but again, in hindsight, I wish that I had done that because I was really sick with the switch over to Klonopin anyway for at least 3 or 4 months. Um, so anyway, got through the summer, got a little bit more stable, decided that I was going to make my third attempt last September. So I did some things that I thought would be really good to prepare myself for it. Again, based on my past experiences. So I did some hypnosis. Um, I did some other modalities. I felt like, I had really gotten myself on a good diet and exercise. And mentally, I'd really gotten myself into a place where I was just like, yeah, I'm going to do it this time. Um, and I, in hindsight now, I look back and I think probably I was overconfident. And there's a fine line there between going into a taper with confidence and going into it the way that I did, which was probably really Pollyannish. Um, and the other mistakes that I made were one, I changed the formulation of my water titration. In other words, my ratio from water to pill. Why I did that, I have no idea. And then I decided to go from cut and hold, which had already proven successful for me, to a daily micro taper. And the reason that I decided to do that is because I had done more reading and that had seemed to work really well for people. So I thought, hey, I'm going to do that. And I set up a pretty aggressive tapering schedule because honestly, I was just so sick of being on this stuff. And again, I went into it overconfident. This stuff will humble you. It's just nasty, and I have so much more respect for it now. So going into the taper that I'm going to start October 1st, I'm going in with a whole different mindset. Anyway, so then the third mistake I made was that I got my math all wrong. And so what I thought I was cutting every day was actually twice as much. And so I'm going along the first couple of weeks. I felt pretty decent. And then I started to not feel good. So I pulled back and I was only cutting every 2 or 3 days. And then because I seem to have some kind of 30-day lag time, and it's common to have a lag time in these drugs. Mine is seems to be 30 days. At day 30, it was like being hit by a freight train. I kid you not. It was horrendous in a way that I had never experienced before, and it completely caught me off guard. Um, to the point where I was in such a panic on day 3 that I went back to my original dose. And within, I would say, a week or two after that, and I just wasn't getting any better, I just started slowly updosing in hopes that I would just get stable enough. Um, and, long story short, over the course of probably 3 or 4 months, I updosed all the way up to 0.375, which is where I'm at now and where I've been holding for the last year. So, um, something that I think happened because of these failed taper attempts is something called kindling. And I had read about it, but again, for some reason I thought, oh, well, that's not going to happen to me. And I do believe that it has, because kindling is something that happens when you stop and start, stop and start, or go back to doses or up dose. And so that's what I've done, over the course of, gosh, 3.5, 4 years is, I got down in dose, I went up, I got down, I went up more. And so the consequence of that is that even though I've been holding for a year, I still do not feel very good. And I just have accepted the fact that I think I'm really about as good as I'm going to feel. And I'm sad because I wish that I were going into this taper feeling better than this, and I'm a little concerned that it's going to create a rough ride, but it is what it is. Again, after holding for a year and not feeling really any better the last couple months, I think I just have to accept that I am where I'm at. So um, I think the biggest mistakes that I made with this last taper, besides the ones I just talked about, was the fact that I just wasn't prepared for the worst. And so, what I'm going to do different on this taper is I'm going to have a support system in place in a way that I never did in the past. So, I started counseling 4 months ago, and I have another video on childhood trauma. So, if you have experienced childhood trauma or situational trauma, because the body holds trauma, um, it really can affect your withdrawal symptoms. I'm working with my doctor on setting up a taper plan, along with my counselor and along with the chiropractor I've been seeing for 4 or 5 months, who's also a wellness practitioner. So I'm working with 3 professionals to set this up and do something that they can advise me on and I can advise them on based on my past experiences and what I feel I can and cannot handle in terms of cuts. Um, I also have hired someone that can essentially run my business for the next 6 to 12 months, which I didn't have last time. And so when things got bad, I needed to get better so that I could run my business so that I could make money. Um, and this time I don't have that situation. I'm also going to put in place, friends and family that can either call me and encourage me, visit me and encourage me, get groceries if I need it, make food for me if I need it, clean my apartment or do laundry, and other contingency plans because this last time, I had some suicidal ideation, some really severe depression, a lot of panic. And I just didn't feel like I had anyone that I could call. And this time, I need to have people that I can lean on and call to help get me over those humps. So, um, that is the story of my 3 failed attempts. And again, I hate the word failed because it just has such negative connotations. And really, it's just, I think, part of the process and learning. And, the way that I'm choosing to look at it is now I finally feel like I have a wealth of information and a wealth of tools to go at this taper in a way that I haven't in the others. So Part two is going to be about all the things that I'm doing to prepare for this next taper and all of the things that I recommend for people that are getting ready to taper. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below. And if you want to subscribe, just click and put on notifications. I appreciate you watching my videos. I hope that I am able to impart some knowledge and provide some motivation, because I know that we can get through this. Even though the internet seems to be full of horror stories, there are millions and millions and millions of people that have gotten through this. It's just they haven't made videos and we don't hear their stories. Um, because honestly, like Xanax is one of the, I think, the most prescribed medications out there. And so you know that there's a lot of people that have gone through this process and they've been able to do it. So they can do it, we can do it. I have every confidence of that. So big hugs, lots of love, and I will see you in part two. Thank you.